Hi, I'm Varushka. I'm a healing arts coach and a master EFT practitioner, mindset coach, and energy healer, and our intuitive healer. And today I want to bring a really beautiful story with one of my clients, Renelle. And I wanted to give a little backstory on how we met. I was living on the big island of Hawaii and had the eruption in 2018. And I got a one way ticket to the Jersey Shore to hang out with a family friend on the Atlantic. And I just needed to go somewhere to get clean air. And I decided to start teaching yoga while I was there because I had the time and space, and there was a local studio. And the first class I got to teach, only one person showed up. It was my first public yoga class in like 5 years. And so essentially, it was a private class. And at the end, I sprayed some flower essence during Savasana. And when it was over, I got to meet the client, and she loved the spray. She was like, "What is this? I want more of this." And I'm like, "Well, I have flower essences. I make them. I just live a block away." And she came with me, and I shared all my Miracle Ink products with her, including um, Miracle Yoni, an ointment for to heal um, the yoni for if you have emotional wounds or trauma there. And when she saw that, she looked at me gravely and said, "Oh, I need this." And bought the whole collection. It was wonderful. And we parted ways. Summer now, and she reached out and said, "I had a really tough year, and all these essences got me through it. And I need more because I just got a diagnosis." And then I said, "Wow, how are you handling this? A cancer diagnosis. Um, did you know that I'm actually not really an active, avid yoga teacher, but that I am an emotional freedom technique practitioner and I work with people on clearing fears and negative feelings and trauma?" And she's like, "No, well, let's do a session." So we started off, and the door into doing this self help work was this diagnosis. So, Ronelle, welcome. I'm so glad that you want to share some of your story with us today. And it's been such an honor to witness your path in the last 2 years. And it's truly been a divine blessing. And it seems like it was a destined, fated meeting because I'm just so inspired by the courage that I've witnessed in you and the victories that I've seen you go through. And just been really rewarding to see your soul just work through some very challenging things. And I know your story is unfortunately not that uncommon. And so today we're going to dedicate this interview around the power of coming out of silence. And so I'm going to hand it to you now and just ask you, when you received this diagnosis, and you can share what that was, what were your feelings and how did you know that it was important for you to deal with some things that were still locked away in your heart?
I'm going to go back to when I met you, by the way. It's always interesting. Thank you for asking me to share my story. What I remembered also from the yoga class was I think you did some tapping in the class, didn't you?
Probably, yeah, because that was my whole intention of doing yoga, that people could, while they were in the position, really connect to and do these affirmations, because we face so much resistance when we're doing some things. So, yeah, I wanted to have people have the experience to feel what that's like to start a dialogue with your body.
And so the tapping, at the end of the class, I followed you to your family friend's house, but I also remember that I had never done anything like that before, too. So it was the flower essence, but also the tapping. Um, had me thinking, but little did I know I'd be calling you. We must have met in August, and I don't remember the timeline, but little did I know. And I'm thinking back to my diagnosis. And as a teacher, I use my summer to take care of doctor's appointments. And in this case, you know, mammograms I hadn't taken. This is before the pandemic. And so, at the beginning of August, I took all these tests, and then they saw I was used to having a fibrous sort of result, and I had a some sort of needle biopsy once, but this time, the third week of August, before I was going back to school, I remember the phone call saying that they had taken the biopsy and that, in fact, they saw something irregular, and they were sorry, but it was a pre-cancer or some sort of. I think they said the words DCIS, um, ductal carcinoma in situ. And so that was a shock. And in that week of going to, now I was going to breast centers and surgeons, and my world turned upside down, as many people who have received a frightening diagnosis have gone through. So I'm just remembering that I don't remember, but speaking of the Jersey Shore, my life was, I felt it was in jeopardy, and I just wanted someone to talk to. And we had already exchanged, and you had already mailed me essences that I was using, but that's when I reached out to you. I was just sitting by the boardwalk looking at the ocean and talking about my this upheaval. So, I'm almost taking it back to, I wonder what made me call you. And then you said, by the way, these are the other things I can do with you. And I thought, I cannot burden, I have two daughters and my husband, and you know, I didn't want to burden them over much. I did need someone to talk to. So I don't know that I answered your question exactly, but my world was turning upside down and I needed a lifeline. So what else did you ask me?
Yeah, it was a year later, and you were just calling me to reorder products. That's what you're like. I'm out, and I just got this diet. Like I need more to support me, and so that was the impetus because you were out. Anyway, yeah. So I'm just curious. Like you, you knew you needed someone to talk to, and what part emotionally were you already afraid of that you needed to face? Like you were suspicious immediately why this was happening. Would you like to share?
Now you're going to have to help me, because when you just said that, I was thinking, in my case, when my world was turning upside down, I had nothing to lose almost. It had everything to lose. So it felt like all of my smaller problems dissolved, and I was facing my mortality. And I don't know what I told you when. I just know all of a sudden I was going through it. And so timelines I'm not good with. When I told you what I told you, um, I'm unclear.
Okay. So when I can share about our first session, we were leaning into, what do the breasts represent? What are the breasts protecting? What's in your heart, the secret that you're protecting, and you were the one sharing with me because this is my memory of it.
No, but
That
I didn't remember how I let loose.
Yeah, and you pretty much from the get-go said, "Yes, I know why I have this. I've been holding this pain in secret. My husband knows, but really no one else in my life knows, and I've just tried to bury it, and now I feel this toxicity has manifested. And so if I'm going to face operation and whatever I'm going to be facing with this staring death in the face, I need to confront this thing that I have never talked about. And that's when we identified your memories of your childhood.
So I just, it's funny because when I finish my dialogue with you, it'll describe the rest of my journey. But for me, I am a survivor. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. And the abuser was my older brother. And so I didn't, that's why I think my memory kind of floats in and out because I didn't know, I, I knew that my calling you was because I was facing this diagnosis, but I didn't know when we started leaving the cancer or dealing with the cancer and all of my fears, and then going into really uncovering the the silence and the just sort of giving voice to those memories that I buried, uncovered, and buried again. And so um, I would say that I was I'm one of four children. I'm the third out of four. And so my older brother, who was about 7 years older than me, is still alive. And I remember that I followed him around like a puppy dog. And I understand now that people call that grooming because I was showered with attention and we listened to albums together. It was like 1970. I was 10. And so I, like innocent children, just, idolized him. So I didn't, that's the complicated thing that I'm learning about survivors. That it's complicated, right? In my case, because it's a sibling who I cared about, and then, I was betrayed, and it went on for 2 years, and so so I never told my parents or my sister, who's 3.5 years older than me. Um, from 10 to 12, I don't know, but I know survivors just manage, right? I managed to get to school. I managed, didn't tell my parents, didn't tell anyone. So it didn't resurface. The silence remained until I was failing out of college. So I thought I was going to therapy for, um, not doing well in school. And in fact, I uncovered and revealed my abuse to a therapist. And so my journey has been like stopping and starting, always a journey, but the revealing and the speaking through silence, um, you know, my work with you was 50 years later.
Yeah. And you probably did not make it a priority to think about or talk about unless you were facing this dire physical condition that made you confront this thing that was still so loaded and charged. Um,
Yeah. I think that the cancer diagnosis definitely, I couldn't have predicted it. I needed to talk. I needed to face those fears, but those fears, you helped me to connect to. It's interesting that it was in the breasts, and even though I was 10 to 12, it's all about my womanhood, and that's what my abuser. He took my trust and my innocence, and for years I felt shame, still do. And I think my silence, I didn't even tell my parents, they passed over the past 6 years. And I think that's, our discussion about my journey to not be silent. I think I was able to do more post-cancer diagnosis when my parents passed. That's what I think.
And why do you think that is, that children, in your case, don't feel that they can speak about what's happening? Like what's at risk? Like why do you think when those things started happening, you
I,
chose?
I, it's so interesting because I'll speak from my own experience. I remember bits and pieces, but I remember threatening to tell. I remember saying, I'm going to tell, but it's not like I remember specific threats. I just remember, where do those silent messages? Why are so many survivors silent with shame? Um, I don't remember overt being told not to tell or something will happen to you. I just knew that it was wrong and it was complicated, and I felt pleasure and I felt anger and I felt confused. But something, what is a 10-year-old who's, like inexperienced in these matters of love in the world know about what not telling? I still don't have that answer, but I understand, having participated in circles with other survivors, that so many people, some people, some survivors tell and they're not believed, and some people never tell. And so in my case, I don't know what that 10-year-old knew, why that 10-year-old was quiet. I can also say, in the cultural surroundings that I grew up in, I think that I I wasn't in such a female dominant sort of society. Like, I cleared off the table, and I'm not saying that all those messages lead to women feeling subordinate, but there's I'm still exploring that. I don't know why, but I was silent.
And what were the dynamics like when you were a teenager? Was he still living in the house, or how did you interact with each other once that was over?
So I remember, because my fleeting memories of being taken into my parents' bedroom in the attached house we lived in. I remember my mother was back to work. Um, I remember being pushed down. I remember those. I don't remember how often, but then I remember, I tracked that we moved when I was 12 and that the visits were less frequent. And so the dynamic question, I'm just thinking to myself, I'm just tracking that. It could have been more or less with more frequency. Um, but the dynamic was, I think I just shut a piece of myself and just tried to survive in my daily life. Um, he, I recall, because I've since broken my silence more frequently, and my sister and other people have said to me that they remember that he went through years of depression when he was in high school and junior college, and spent months and days in his room and so forth. But I was disconnected. So my dynamic was probably that I learned to sort of avoid thinking about him. I was in the room with him, meaning, when I look back, I'm 61. When I look back at family holidays and things, and that may be a reason I didn't tell my parents. It's not a logical or rational reason, but family and my extended family is very closely knit. My father was one of 9 siblings, and just there were always get-togethers, and like, my father visited his mother every Sunday, so I was like constantly thrown in with cousins. It never occurred to me. I didn't grow up in the world of play dates. You just went wherever your parents told you, and it was always to visit a grandparent. And in that home, somebody else was always visiting. So I was always with cousins and family. So what I'm saying is, like, I just learned to develop that callus of being in a room, and it didn't feel good, but it was more important to me to be with my family.
Yeah, and no one wants to rock the boat. You know, a child doesn't know what consequences and the shaming and all of the unknown. Um, so after you started working on it during college, what were some of the symptoms you were facing that you started talking about it?
Well, so I basically through high school didn't have any relationships. I had crushes, but there was no interaction with any love interests because I just had crushes on people. I wasn't going near anybody. And then in college, I think I went out on some dates in high school, but what I'm getting at is the circumstances were my grades. And then, in the same way, I couldn't remember sitting with you and talking about my cancer diagnosis, it came out, right? I'd buried it and it came out. And so I was not talking about my poor grades anymore. I was talking about my harm. And, and I was with that therapist for about 4 years. And for me, um, I wasn't growing anymore in that relationship. I think I had, and I don't know if anyone else has ever been in therapy, but I think I just no longer, the talking no longer was serving me, but I was growing. I had a group of friends that knew. So in college, going through that therapy experience, now I'm thinking as we're speaking, I told some friends and I had a really strong, supportive circle of friends. And so I think that that's where my growth was happening. And I started to take better care of myself in that I just, like left college, but went back to finish and found out what I wanted to do in life, which was to be a teacher. And then I met my husband. And so I think I just started to repair my own repair. I just started to be better to myself. I don't know that I answered your question, but I'm thinking back in that time that powerful moments were being in therapy and revealing, disclosing, as I've learned to say in circle, and then sharing with a group of friends and with my sister, and I think that was another part of the journey into sharing and telling. But it stopped there sort of until I met my husband and I told him on the second date. And then, and I think all of those were indicators that I was less ashamed of myself and more ready to feel joy.
And were you specific with your husband on what happened, or were you vague?
I don't quite remember, and it is definitely hard for me to go into details.
Right.
I think I was vague.
Yeah.
And I think he knows because there are some intimate uh, things that are hard for me to do, to receive. And I think that is definitely because of my harm. But he's been incredible, incredibly supportive. And, I'm only now realizing this whole notion of not being silent. And for me, it was different in different ways at different times. It was really powerful, but I knew I couldn't be with him if I didn't fully reveal myself. And the fact that he could see me and want to be with me, um, speaks to whatever that 10-year-old felt. People, my friends who I revealed it to, and later other people. It only brought compassion and closeness.
Beautiful. And in starting a family, you still chose to keep that quiet? I mean, wasn't relevant in your life, right? You chose to stay silent with your family.
So, so with my two daughters, with my younger sibling, with any of my cousins, I chose not to reveal it. So only at that point, some best friends and right. I mean, the numbers have changed, but at that time, over 30 years ago, my husband and some close friends and my sister.
So I remember that probably 6 months into our work, you had to have multiple operations, and yet you didn't have to take any medicine, and you were clear of the cancer 6 months later. And after that point, there was a moment, and I don't know what that moment was inside of you, where the victory and the relief over the cancer and the freedom that you were experiencing to have like really opened up and connected to your inner child that had been still hurt and scared and powerless. So there was that moment that maybe the safety of being now cancer free again and having made that, where you realized there was no other door to go through than to tell your daughters, because it was so connected in a way that, you know, the illness and this topic was so connected that you felt like you really wanted them to know you. And so, do you remember what that pivot was like?
No, I remember that so much of our work, which was new for me, right? As I said, in college, I was in therapy and talking a lot about what happened and dealing with what I wasn't able to do. And then, anyone in their 20s, not always so clear. It's hard enough to be in your early 20s, but at this juncture with you, the work we did were like I had never talked to my 10-year-old. I never talked to the little girl, the beautiful 10-year-old who the world was open for. And then it changed. And to apologize to her, to acknowledge her, to see her as someone who, I was sorry. Like it was so strange and empowering, but so tender to see her and speak to her. And my healing was around saying I'm sorry to her, not just being sorry for myself and balancing myself and saying, wow, Renelle, you made it in the world. You found a wonderful partner. You have two children. I had to go back and speak to her. And the I don't know what the pivot was, but I can say, and you can help me, that during the pandemic, I was erupting. I was erupting. So my anger, it's always shocking to me. Not, it shouldn't be, but like I've buried memories, but I've also buried rage. And so some of our work involved saying, fuck you. But also, I think there was something about being in the pandemic and where I was in my journey and me complaining bitterly to one of my friends and saying, I'm sick and tired of him getting all of this sad sack. Everybody felt sorry for him. When they would ask me how he was, it was impossible for me to answer because I wasn't in touch with him. I was seeing him at family events, but I don't, I don't, it doesn't matter what the timeline was, but when I said to this friend of mine, I'm so fed up, I just want to shout it from the rooftops and tell everyone that he is an ass, she was like, okay, well, why don't you start, closer to home? And it was like, I guess I was ready to hear that between our work and her saying, why don't you tell your daughters? And there they were. It was the pandemic, and one daughter came home, the other one was home, and it just sort of seemed like the right. I was ready. I was ready for that next. I
That's
say reveal,
It's
disclosure.
like life pushed it into your face, and it was like a closing in on you where it was the elephant in the room. That's how I remember it, where you're like, uh, this, it's time to give this little girl the voice. She needs to tell her story. Like she's a part of you that hasn't been introduced to your daughters yet. And it was like life was just serving them up on a tray, like, here they are. There's no place to go. They're right in your field. Are you going to share this part of your journey? And yeah, life, we spoke about that you were ready and you felt really on board with that. And do you want to share how you decided to approach them and what you did with them, just to share for others if they're in this situation of being ready to share with their immediate family?
I spoke to my husband and said that I really wanted them to know, and he was perfectly fine with that. And I said, and I'd like us to be together. And so we planned a bike ride. We were back on the Jersey Shore, and we picked a weekend day, and we rode to a beach. And because of our work, where I was, some of our work has been drawing, and there's something I remembered, which I may remember to describe later about a picture I drew. But also, when we were working with my little girl, you had me get a picture of myself and create an altar at different times that we were working. But I began to look at that picture a lot, and that really, because of the burying and trying to forget, looking at her, I'm going to get a picture. So, you
Oh,
know,
this is the first time you're showing me. Oh,
and so I brought that with me, and we just sat at the beach, and I said, I don't remember what I said, of course, but the essence of it was I took the picture out and said, I've been working a lot with my little girl, and I want to tell you a little bit about my childhood, and I told them that I was harmed by my brother, that I'm a survivor, that I'm stronger because of it, and that I wanted them to know more of me, and that I was telling them because I wanted them to see more of me, and it was just, excuse me, very powerful. Each of them, I mean, I forget that when I sort of drop the bomb, that it takes some, like I'm just telling it, right? But my husband may remember, he may be, like he may have more to say about it, but the moment I know what it felt like and I know how they responded. And it was just so compassionate. And, and over the weeks after that, they asked, they didn't want to know details, nor was I planning to tell them, but they asked about him, and I told them a little, enough for them to just be able to know. And that's basically, I can say, since that was, I'm bad with dates, March of 2020 was the pandemic, so it was like May. Um, our relationship has shifted again, and it's just feels so much more. I just being seen and them seeing and knowing more of me has just made it easier to be together. Not even easier, just yeah. I just it was a great. It's in positive. It's been really positive.
I think it's so beautiful in hearing your experience that you just took that time and carved it out and made it a separate outing, not something that's happening at the dinner table or in the home, but like outside in a neutral space. And there's never going to be a good time to say it. So that you gave it actually that special space around it and the way that you've handled it since. You've had many opportunities with extended family members, and it sounds like it's been well received, but and also from the way that you're sharing it. You haven't been coming out and being aggressively angry toward the perpetrator, which, by all counts you're totally in your right to be, and yet you've done it from a place of a responsibility, like almost a responsibility to your inner child, of sharing your story without being on a mission to just, to call someone out. And that's very different. And that's the way that I feel you were able to make true connections.
It's been powerful. I mean, I've since called it my truth train, but that, to my heart, to tell my children, and I never would have predicted it. If someone asked me a year ago or a year before I did, I was so used to, I was an expert with burying and being secretive, and like I got through the world, and I have gratitude. I was able to find a career that I like, and be with someone who truly cares about me, and have a family. But to have been able to share with them was like the best thing that ever happened to us. Because I think also, when I think about the rest of the people that I've shared with, it's like, if I could share this, I mean, I'm wondering if that's what it's like for them. It's like, holy shit, anybody, nothing is going to knock me over the feather. If I can tell this story, which I spent such a long time feeling so small about and so ashamed about it, then, you know, maybe it offers the opportunity, and it has actually, for other people to share similar harm, let alone if I can share this,
Yeah. By you speaking out,
they can share.
there was response.
That too.
Are there some ways that you want to share that people responded favorably or compassionately to encourage others, that there are really supportive ways of responding if someone tells them something personally?
I mean, I wound up sending this, taking myself on the truth train. And so I got responses like, I believe you. It happened to me. It happened to two of my children. Um, I think you're amazing. I mean, a range of compassionate responses, but all of which, I'm so sorry, all of which uh, ended up being where I just felt held. And it, and and I can't imagine being on the other side of it, even though I've been watching people on the other side of it, because there was not, they didn't expect it, and yet, I got texts afterwards and all kinds of beautiful messages, but nothing but compassion.
It's so encouraging, and I just think it's so beautiful because what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like you really were met with understanding and listening, and in a day and age where we're all so busy and people only text, like that life actually presented you many personal interactions and to really create true connections with the people you've known your whole life. And that's why I think it's really important to share that, it gets easier. Like once you realize you're going to survive sharing your truth and who you are and what's happened to you, we, like I was saying, normalizing the taboo. Here is this taboo for that you didn't share until you were 60. And now, like, has it been worth it? What's changed in how you feel and also your connection to your family now that you have come out of that silence?
I think that I can't see all the shifting, but this freeing, the being able to say I was harmed, I'm a survivor. Like you said, it sort of it normalizes it, and I think it gives other people the freedom, people who are receiving the information, besides because they're all people that I knew well, I know well, very besides being very compassionate, I think other people have shared other things. So it's been good for me to speak my truth um, with more people who I know because it's not that the story gets easier. I just feel like I spend so much time not being centered in myself that by, sort of, in a way, I was calling him out. I was taking away. There was another thing that I also felt I was doing that I was saying, I want everybody to stop feeling sorry for him and see my strength because I was really tired of holding everything in. And I was holding his secret. And he was this entitled male. I don't care. Like, I just wanted, I wanted, I wanted justice and I wanted to even things out. I didn't want to be holding this anymore. I don't know. It didn't answer your question, but it gained momentum.
Yeah, it's like the child still has this agreement to protect him. And that moment you realize, what? Because of this person, I was completely disempowered my entire life. And
With
when
everyone.
reclaiming my energy, I have no responsibility to protect this person who didn't protect me, you know? So, what, on that note, what did your little girl would have preferred from your brother? What were you looking for? That connection.
Hold that because I think there was something about family. So hold that question because I'll forget it, please. I was holding up what I thought was the family, the standard bearers where you hold up your family crest and the family was everything. And so I think I was silent to preserve what my 10-year-old saw as a loving extended family. I have over 50 first cousins and they all live in the same geographic area. So if I'm not at a wedding, I'm at a, you know, and I think that by beginning slowly, I really didn't get to, I only got to five cousins and other people, other family members. But by doing that and realizing that, you know, I know what my good name is, I know my family's name and reputation is, but I'm more important. And if they see me and love me and know me and know who he is, then you know, I know I waited till my parents passed away to do the kind of truth. I don't remember now if my mother had passed October 6th. I
Yeah.
told them in May. My mother didn't pass till October. I told them. But my mother was already cognitively not connected. And so, in a sense, I waited until they would be what I don't even know the reason, but my point is, I think that my silence also had to do with this perception. I was trying to figure out when you asked me, what is the 10-year-old thinking? Well, I don't know, but family was everything, so I didn't want to rock that boat, which
Yeah.
you had already said, but it just became clear to me that I liked the other things on the boat, and I was afraid that if I spoke, that all of that would
And
come
you have
crashing down.
no role models, and exactly. So when you so you had an opportunity to have a confrontation after you have shared your survivor story with your extended family. You had an ideal moment after your mother passed, to have a confrontation with your siblings. Do you want to share how that went down?
Yeah, I think when I told my girls, as I said, in May, but then my mother passed in October, and that's the other thing. I know I started this dialogue with you saying I don't quite remember, and I don't want to beat myself up for it because for whatever reasons, things just don't stick in a very specific time format for me. But definitely when my mother passed and when we were cleaning out her house, my three siblings were in and out, boxing things and pointing to pictures and doing what people do when they clear out a house. And so sometimes my husband would come with me, sometimes my sister would come with her husband, and the perpetrator, my younger brother, everybody was coming in and out on weekends depending on their work schedule. So I knew that I was thinking that I was going to wait for a day, but I wasn't going to ask anyone when it was just the siblings, the four of us. And that day came in February. And everybody was boxing in different rooms. And I said to everyone toward the end of the day, I'd like to chat with everyone for a few, I'll probably need 15 minutes. And so we all sat in the den. And actually, we sat in four corners of the room. And I said to them what I had been saying and what I had said to my daughters, which was, and again, I think that that my daughters were the last two people I had told. And I said, my sister had already known, but I just said, I've been doing a lot of work since the pandemic, and I've been working on myself, and that I was tired of being silent, and that I was a survivor. And I was a survivor of sexual abuse. And my perpetrator is right there. And I just pointed at my older brother. And my younger brother was here, and my older sister was on the other side of me. And as I said before, the perpetrator was silent, but my younger brother was, he didn't really understand. And I understand now that for some people, and close to me, it wasn't registering. And he came over and he hugged me and said, I'm not sure I understand. And he sat down again. And the room was silent. And I said more, besides pointing at my perpetrator, I said, and I'm tired of being silent and I'm going to talk about it. And if I want to write about it, I'm going to write about it, but I'm no longer going to be silent. And then, out of order, my younger brother came over to me and my sister, and, just she teared up. And my younger brother said to my sister, you knew about this? And I said, well, I told her in my 20s. He said, and you didn't do anything? And she's like, it wasn't my story to tell. And I'm sort of watching. I had said to them after I said, and I'm tired of being silent, I said, I will sit and wait if anybody wants to say anything. But I think I was really waiting for him.
Did,
Well, waiting.
did the other two siblings look at him or ask him, or did they? No.
It was just it felt like a long time. It was quiet after he hugged me. My younger brother hugged me. It just got quiet. And then it was time for me to go to prayer. So I said, excuse me, I have to change. Like I waited. There was a little talk between my younger brother and my sister, but there was silence. And I went up to change. My younger brother came up after me and said, I don't know. Where was I? I'm 5 years younger than you. You're telling me this happened in the house when mommy went to work? What the hell was I doing? And my sister, well, that was when they came to my house 2 days later, but she had, tried to sort of as piece it together and say, well, I know I was in high school and I was on every after school committee. So as he was in shock, I came downstairs and the perpetrator was gone. So that was, except for my mother's funeral. No, I had seen him at the funeral. I hadn't seen him. I can't remember. But the point was, that's how I told my sibling.
And how did you feel in that moment when it was ready to be shared?
It was so good to say it, and I will not be silent if I want to talk about it. I'm actually doing it now. If I want to write about it, I did do some writing, therapeutic writing, but it felt good to say, and no one is going to shut me up.
So in that moment, you didn't feel shame or guilt. You felt it was time. You were standing up for your inner child.
Ask me if I knew the night before I was going to do it. I do feel like I erupted. I was afraid, so that I was just waiting for opportunities. That's what it felt like. It's that I knew I wanted to do it, but I couldn't engineer it. I hoped, I didn't think beyond the hoping that one day all the partners wouldn't be coming through and it would just be us. I guess I would have figured it out, but it felt good.
Life completely delivered that to you because, yeah, normally their partners probably would have been there. And um, so, how did he respond to you after that? Your brother, the perpetrator.
Yeah, something happened. I say it because it was like oh, right. So that was February. A lot of healing and conversation with the younger brother he said, look, I'm going to be transparent. Like, how do these things happen? I said, I'm not an expert in pedophilia. That's your journey. He said, I want to get him help. I have to figure this out. He was on his journey of not even understanding what his family was now. My younger brother, what was happening? How were his perceptions changing about my parents? Because he was so upset with himself, and I don't want to speak for him, but it made him question our family. What would have led to, like, people don't understand how these things happen.
Right,
And I'm not the expert.
right. And sometimes there could be histories of that, but you just don't know. So when a secret comes out, it's just a Pandora's box of the
That's
unknown, right?
that's what it was. And so I didn't really February, March, April. I can't all I can tell you is that we worked together, we worked together, we worked together. We had a session, you and I had a session with my husband and two children soon after my disclosure to the girls. We worked, and then at some point, I wanted to continue my truth train and tell my nieces and nephews. And I remember my younger brother saying, you say what you want, you tell who you want. I want you to be healed, and I support you. He stopped speaking to my brother, stopped taking him to doctor's appointments. He was like, my younger brother was like the de facto patriarch of the family after my dad passed. And so, he no longer responded. I really was only hearing this a little, but not trying to sort of figure out everybody else's relationships. But I decided to tell all of my nieces and nephews. So I started with my younger brother's four children, chose another quiet moment on a porch in the summer, then all of whom received me with incredible compassion and texts later on. And they're in there, from 17 to 25. Then I told my sister's children, who were 19 to 30. Also, one of those nieces and nephews said, I believe you. And I found that so tender. I just did
Yeah,
that.
if someone doesn't know how to respond, that's really, if someone just says, I believe you, that's the best thing they can respond.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful. And I did them together in a quiet park in the city. And then I knew that I wanted to tell the perpetrator's children. I wanted to tell my brother's children, but one lives far away and one lives locally. And because I'm off in the summer, my plan was to fly out there to speak to my niece. But as fate we're not necessarily going to call it fate would have it, she was coming in, and everybody was spending the weekend near each other. And and the dynamic, I'll just say it, I hope it's not long and boring. The dynamic was changing because my siblings were in less contact, although I didn't ask them who was really in touch with my older brother. But he wound up, the perpetrator wound up getting sick and dehydrated and whatever. And my niece, who would normally call upon my younger brother, things were shifting. There was less. My younger brother was saying, you need to step up. You need to. So already there was a shift in the family dynamic, so that when I chose my day to walk with them to the beach, um, they had already felt months of a shift because there was less attention from my younger brother. Anyway, when I took them to the beach, and that was a hard one, and my husband and younger brother and his wife knew that I was going to be telling them. They had their phones with them in case I called them, and I told his children, his two children. And their immediate response was a million things, right? But very compassionate toward me. And then, one of them said, I knew it. Her parents, the perpetrator and his wife, had split up 10 years before. And she said, Mom always told me that there was something depressed about him. I knew there was something off. And, my other nephew said, just a lot of anger, confusion. What I can only imagine the child of finding out that your parent is that. Um, and so when you ask me the question, did the perpetrator reach out to me? Well, that weekend, they each called their therapists. They came back to me to offer compassion. They didn't ask me for any details or anything. They just said, would you be with us when we tell our mom? I said, yes. We're going to tell our mom on Tuesday, whatever it was, the weekend. So, to make a long story short, they started with their father in the morning. And I'm off because it's still the summer. And I get a text. And the text says, my kids spoke to me. Uh, like to talk to you. Please don't call me till after 10. So I'm like, I was triggered, enraged. His partner goes back to her home at 10. Whatever the fuck it was, that was like when my husband and kids came home, I was not, I told them what happened, and I was just so mad. They just let me talk and it was fine, but that was the communication I got. And at that time, imagine my brother was trying to get him into a special program. He said, Renelle, let me be transparent. I just want to know why this happened. I want to erase this possibility that it was it. I just want to figure out why and forgive me. Um, and I told my younger brother how mad I was at this convenient text and that I fuck that. The telling did shift, meaning move things along in terms of, sadly, their journey, but they felt like everything would be okay, that the siblings were trying to find help for their dad. I told them about my circle and they were trying to get their dad into circle, but I no longer, they just communicated me once on the holiday, but I really did not, never had a close relationship with my niece and nephew. So, what was it? It was August, September, October. Time marched on, and things didn't happen. I forgot until I told someone. I did find out that he harmed other people.
And you did not anticipate anything like that.
That was August.
Yeah. Well, so in that moment on your truth train, you had pretty much shared with everyone you had intended to share with. And then this bomb dropped of news. And what did that incite in you when you found out there were other victims?
I'm going to say that I had intended to expand my circle to the first cousins that I was closer to. I still intend that. But I only wanted to do it in person. And I realized that my summer from June of disclosing that I actually had a busy, quiet summer of this. So after I got to the end of the summer and I found that out, I was so mad. And it was a very strange anger because it's going to sound silly to say I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one. But when I found out that I wasn't the only one, I was righteously angry. I was sickened. I was madder. Like I was furious and so angry that when I did a little more talking, someone said to me, I will give you the name of a lawyer. And,
That
it
moment,
was,
that moment, you're like, fuck this silence. Like, I want justice.
I mean, you know, all of the Me Too movement, all of I don't really, in the summer, there were all these ads for lawyers, we can help you with sexual abuse. I was told by someone that the statute is extended to August because of the pandemic and because of the Me Too movement and perhaps specific people who were harmed. And when that happened, I decided to see a lawyer. I was mad. I was so mad.
And this
And
wasn't even at all even in your field, right? These possibilities or these options.
no, I wasn't
Ah,
like I was planning on getting to the first cousins. I got to a couple of people, but that happened. And then there was this deadline. And then I talked to a couple of different legal people and decided to file, before the deadline in August in New York State. And that is never the last part of my journey, but that's what I'm in now.
yeah.
And that, when you and I worked and we talked about the Statue of Liberty, that's the icon I use now when I sign my name. Like sometimes I pick the different things for the mood, but when we did the work with the Statue of Liberty, that standing up was different from just me standing up for myself because now I was standing up for others who would
And
not stand up, who would not have stood up.
and that gave you the fuel that it's so interesting that when we're a survivor, we can handle our own pain,
Oh
but
yeah.
find out that that same thing happened to our daughter, unacceptable. So it's interesting how we have the capacity as humans to minimize our thing. But you were in your healing journey, but the moment that you heard there were more, it was like suddenly you
I'm
had
gonna fight.
already reclaimed enough of your life force that you had the capacity to stand up for someone else. And it's like it's what's so beautiful is just that how life revealed things and turned them into a mission that was beyond you, it was beyond your plan or intention. And I just want to interject too is that during that time, I just want to honor your younger brother because just everything you've shared on the journey, that you were really blessed in your family dynamics to have your husband and your younger brother be such an advocate, be so curious, be so proactive, informing himself, stepping up, being a mediator. He didn't have to do any of that, and we don't know. Men naturally try to want to fix things and help, and yet I'm just touched that you had so much support that I feel like gave you the strength to step up for others too now, and that you got that the papers in just right in the nick of time, and that was beyond your control.
That was unbelievable. It really, right. I was racing to a finish line. I didn't even know I was going to join the race. but I made it. And doesn't matter about the outcome. It matters, I just wasn't having it. And so you know, um, that's where the journey has taken me now.
Well,
And yeah, I would just say, that the part of my healing is working with you and also being in a circle with other people. And that's been very powerful because less silence and also hearing that you're not alone is really, really healing.
and you're not just speaking with your family about it, that you're going somewhere else to work on this. And yeah, it's really important to have the perspective of also showing up for others, and also, again, normalizing the taboo to realize we're not special cases, that everyone, so many people have unfortunately suffered in the silence. And anyway, time wise, we kind of have to wrap it up right now, but I wanted to ask you from let's say that summer before you got your diagnosis to right now, like who you were then and how you are now. Share with me three qualities how you feel being Renelle now as before.
More accepting. I feel more joy because I no longer have to crouch in the shadows, Saying that I'm a survivor is actually empowering. And I don't know, I just hope that, and I've experienced that, that it's okay to be me just like this. I'm strong.
You are. Are there some affirmations or things that you've had to tell your inner child through all the bumps in the road this year with all the rage that you face? And maybe we can share about that for another time, just speaking about, all the anger, because even though so much beauty you shared today, we kept it pretty tempered, because, it's not for the faint of heart. But yeah.
I don't want to curse too much, but yeah, I I'm strong to people trying to silence me.
And what is the upgrade for that? The affirmative is, it's safe for me to
I
have a voice
it's
now.
it's safe for me to come out and speak about my harm, and it's safe for me. It's good for me, and it might help others. And and as I uncover these parts of myself, I feel more compassion toward myself and then toward the world.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Is there any advice you would give someone who's maybe in your age group, or anyone really? But I think your story is a little novel because, you chose to work on it later in life so deeply. Is there any advice you'd want to give someone who is thinking about coming out of silence?
Whenever it's the right time for you, it's the right time for you. I can't wish that I did it sooner, but I wonder, I think that burying for such a long time, it's okay, but I would want people who are thinking about it to know that, you may not always be received with compassion, but you're going to be compassionate with yourself. And that's what's important. We can't keep taking care of other people. We have to take care of ourselves, and then it will be able to reach out to others. So I hope that my story is just my story, but um, to anyone who has been harmed, I feel your pain, but I know um, that there's so much to that who I am is that's just a part of who I am. But that, I came through the fire, and I hope that, like, I forged something, and so that if you decide to share, um, the warrior in you will come out.
And just thinking, that's why, I mean, the survivor is so multifold, that term, because the child survived that and still made an incredible life, and she built this incredible life. So she is already innately strong. But just witnessing the work you've done so tenderly and so honoring of that inner child and starting to listen and slow down, um, giving her the voice back. It's just, I've witnessed it build your strength in ways that's blown my mind. So it's been really inspiring. So it is worth the risk because you were strong enough to hold the secret. You're going to be strong enough to defend your truth.
It feels good.
Yeah. So yeah, I love the levity in your face. Like every time I've spoken to you in sessions, I'm always amazed just like how youthful it seems. Like you just turn more and more youthful with any time I've interacted with you. And anyway, I just love you. I'm so grateful for you. And we could continue some other aspects of the story of the survivor another time, addressing sacred rage and all of that. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be asked to speak. So,
All
thank
right.
you.
I'm going to say good night for now. Bye.